Greetings everyone! This is a quick promo before the video begins. If you're new to the channel and you didn't know it yet, I am actually an author in addition to being a YouTuber, and I have 2 books that you can get on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1 and The Occult Mafia. The first is sort of a bizarre, absurdist kaiju anime mashup, and the other is a horror noir story with a hint of a western thrown in there. They're both set in the same universe, and at this point have received mostly positive reviews, so you might want to check them out. I've provided Amazon links for both of them down in the description. They're both available in either paperback or Amazon Kindle, and Operation Red Dragon is also available in audiobook form. So if either of these strike your fancy and you want to support a struggling artist, feel free to go down and check out either one or both of them. Alright, the shameless self-promotion is out of the way, we can get on with the video. Thank you all for your support.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and I've learned that you have to have a very discerning eye when it comes to reporting news as it happens, because what seems like a juicy story might actually just be fake. Don't worry, I'm not going into a political diatribe here. I'm just speaking from my own experience working in doing Godzilla news as it happens. When we got our first images of Godzilla Singular Point, no one was entirely sure whether or not they were real or some kind of fan project, and speculation ran wild until the official announcement dropped. So, in that particular case, something that seemed like it couldn't be real, or at least seemed dubious, did turn out to be real. But after that, we once again had to be careful again because more fan art started coming. There was an image, for example, that purported to be a full body shot of Godzilla, or at least a full design of Godzilla. It was really just a piece of fan art where someone took the head and drew what they figured the rest of the body would look like based on that. Great piece of art, but not official. There were also images of Varan and Baragon floating around, which were purported to be concept art for those creatures as they would appear in the series. I took one look at those and I decided that they were indeed authentic pieces of concept art for GMK, so I didn't say anything about that either. Then we started getting other images just the other day, as well as a poster. I decided to hold off just long enough to see if there were any retractions. And then it turns out we get a full-blown trailer. Now admittedly, the trailer doesn't tell us much, but it does show a very different balance of human to monster footage. You may recall that for the Polygon trilogy, they held off showing any sign that there were even monsters in these movies for as long as they possibly could. The very first images we kept getting of the first movie, Planet of the Monsters, which for a time we thought would be called Monster Planet, there was nothing in there to indicate the presence of Godzilla other than a couple of them had the title with the name Godzilla on it. And it led to a lot of people giving into their pareidolia and saying, Godzilla is in these images. See this tree? It looks kind of like his dorsal plate. That mountain range must be his back. He's in there somewhere, I know it. And I was the only person who was saying, guys, I don't think Godzilla's gonna be in this movie all that much, and I don't think any of the other monsters they say exist in this timeline are gonna be in it either. I won't gloat. This time, though, the monsters are far more prominent, and the focus as far as the humans go appears to be on these 2 characters who also appear in the poster. They don't necessarily look like your typical anime protagonists. The guy may be a little bit more than the girl, but you may also notice this weird little floating dog creature. So apparently Godzilla Singular Point is going to have a mascot character, but what capacity that mascot character is going to exist in, I have no idea. Mascot characters can sometimes get a bad reputation because they predominantly exist to sell merchandise, because they're a simple, cutesy design that you can make anything out of easily. You can put it on a t-shirt, you can make a cute little plushie, whatever you want. Which seems kind of redundant in a series with kaiju in it. But then again, sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get a character like Ein from Cowboy Bebop who actually contributes to the plot. So, I don't know what this creature is going to contribute to the Singular Point series, if anything, but we'll find out. One last note about the poster. it shows that Godzilla can apparently open his mouth snake style, like hyperextending his jaws. Something he hasn't done in any of the live-action movies, not even really in Shin. So that's certainly taking advantage of the fact that this is animated, but he still looks like Godzilla. But that brings us to the other monsters. We now officially know that classic monsters are gonna be showing up in Godzilla Singular Point, but I don't think the ones they revealed are the ones that any of us expected. We were all expecting Ghidorah and Mothra to be front and center again, because they always are front and center again, and Mechagodzilla would probably come along for the ride as well, because that's the pattern Toho always seems to fall into. They'll try something different for like a couple of movies, and then it's bring in Mothra, bring in Ghidorah, bring in Mechagodzilla. But for Singular Point, they brought in Rodan and Gearus, Jet Jaguar, Titanosaurus, and Gabara. Freaking Gabara, people! He hasn't been seen since Godzilla's Revenge, and I'm not sure anyone even wanted to see him again because of how unpopular that movie tends to be. Yet he's in the movie. Series, sorry. I'm gonna have to get used to saying that. But anyway, the redesigns for these creatures are something else. They are clearly, once again, taking advantage of the fact that this is animation, and therefore they're doing stuff that they cannot do as well in live action. They're making these creatures that could only possibly be done in animation. But does that mean the designs work? That's the big question here. Because they are some massive overhauls. And admittedly, some of these monsters I mentioned are long overdue for a massive overhaul. But there is such a thing as going too far, as the Polygon Mechagodzilla demonstrated. So, on the whole, I don't think they're bad designs, necessarily, but are they good designs for these particular creatures? Well, that's what we're going to find out. Starting, of course, with Rodan, because he's the first one we see. It looks like here they're going for a more scientifically accurate Pteranodon frame, only with Rodan's features on it. Dual crests instead of a singular one, and the armored spikes on the torso. Different approach, admittedly. Again, recognizing that the original Rodan's design had to somehow accommodate a man in a suit, this is still pretty different from what we've seen before. And as a Rodan fan, I find myself being a little on the fence about it. Because, I mean, yes, if Rodan existed in real life, he would probably look more like this. But I don't know, I find the only reason that I recognize it is because I know what to look for. Would people necessarily recognize it as Rodan without that context? There is a tendency to sometimes refer to any giant avian creature with the nickname Rodan. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to see more of this Rodan in order to make a final judgment. And based on what we see later in the trailer, there's gonna be something very different with him. I also feel I should probably point out Rodan appears to be very small. He's Pteranodon-sized, which is still big, but as kaiju go, he appears to be on the small side, because he's just a regular Pteranodon. He's not skyscraper-sized. But again, looks like they're going to be doing something very different with him, so we will see. And then along comes Jet Jaguar. Definitely unexpected, as said. And it looks like they kind of gave him a slightly more robotic look, sort of in the vein of, say, a more tokusatsu-esque, less sleek, less futuristic look. Sort of like a Giant Robo from Johnny Sacco and his Flying Robot, or Giant Robo the Animation, or perhaps Super Robot Red Baron or something like that. Otherwise, his design appears to be the least altered of the whole bunch. Other than looking more robotic, he still is recognizably Jet Jaguar. Though I gotta say, his face looks a little smushed for some reason, and his grin has this weird hair lip to it, almost like he's doing a cat grin. In anime, if you haven't seen much anime, sometimes when a character is being especially mischievous, their mouth will form a W shape to mimic a cat smile. So, Maybe it's just the angle, but that's throwing me a little. Otherwise, can't really say too much about them ruining the design when the design hasn't actually been changed all that much. I'm guessing he probably was changed to the least in order to avoid more problems with Super Raya production, because they've been doing Ultraman and Gridman, and they've been going with far more futuristic robot appearances for those characters. So you don't necessarily want to redesign Jet Jaguar in that vein and have them sue again. So yeah, he's the least altered, other than Godzilla as far as we've seen, so can't really say much more about that. Then we have Gabara. I still am surprised they brought him in. Now, it is possible this might also be Baragon, but I'm pretty sure it's Gabara because of the face, the ears, the color, and the texture of the skin. Those all say Gabara to me more than they do Baragon. Baragon would at least have more recognizable features. The only thing that might make me think it's Baragon is that it's quadrupedal, and there's the horn. But Gabara had a horn too, so jury's out, I suppose. For now, I'm gonna say it's Gabara. And, well, this is very different. Gabara originally started out as this big humanoid ogre with a cat's face and a shock of bright orange hair. And this looks like some kind of variation of a bull, almost. But it's far less goofy looking than the original Gabara, and, you know, I'm not sure how many people were actually calling for Gabara's return, but I also don't know if many people will shed a tear over him being redesigned to the point where he actually looks pretty menacing. So, I guess I don't have that much of a problem with the design on principle, but again, it's really, really different from what we saw before. Actually, you may recall not too long ago, the official Godzilla Twitter stated that Gabara was, for some reason, a toad, and this looks more like a toad than the original Gabara did. Coincidence? You decide. And existing somewhere between Jet Jaguar and Rodin is Anguirus. He is very big, very spiky. Actually, bringing this back around to GMK, which I mentioned earlier, he reminds me of the maquettes they designed when he was supposed to be in GMK. How he was designed to look more like a proper quadruped as opposed to a person crawling, and had the bigger spikes on him. His head's really tiny compared to the rest of him, but again, I think I could look at this and still recognize him as Anguirus. Bigger, too, than Rodin is going to be, but still looks to be smaller as kaiju go. But at the same time, that also means he's more able to interact with the humans as seen in this shot. So, yeah, this design I can get behind. This, I feel, is a good update for Anguirus, one that maintains a recognizability while still taking advantage of animation. And then we have Titanosaurus. And the design is far more hydrodynamic, the color is there, but again, this feels kind of like they almost went so far in the opposite direction that he does become unrecognizable. Rather curiously, he's got what appear to be Godzilla spines running down his back. I don't know if that's somehow significant, but it's also very different from what the original Titanosaurus had running down his back, which was a giant fish fin. So, this almost looks more like a whale. There's not much saurus in this Titanosaurus. So again, I wonder, did it go too far in the redesign? I'm gonna have to see more. Like, they're doing a really impressive shot. I actually, many years ago when I was first coming up with all the concepts for Operation Red Dragon, I drew a picture of Barracudasaurus that looked exactly like this shot, not of the design, but of the creature leaping over a battleship. So, whoever is at Toho that has a psychic link to me and somehow knew about that image, get out of my head, please. But here's the controversial statement for the day. I could learn to accept all of these designs as new variations of the monsters, if you can convince me they work as characters. because the designs will only get you so far. The monsters we see here, they are all individuals. They all have their own personalities, and that's something that the series really needs to remember. They each have, yes, they're all big and they all break things, but they each have at least one trait that makes them distinct from all the others. Rodin is pretty smart, Jaguar is a bully, Anguirus is tenacious, Titanosaurus is peaceful and just wants to be left alone, Jaguar is an altruistic superhero. If they don't have at least that much going for them, then they can look like anything and it won't matter. Now obviously you can do a little bit of variation in there, but ultimately the monsters have to have their own individual personalities or it's a completely wasted effort. You can't just have an interesting design, heck you can't even have a classic design and shun the personality side of it. Case in point, remember the 1998 Godzilla? In the live action movie, it was the whole package of poor redesign and poor personality. It didn't look like Godzilla, it didn't behave like Godzilla. That's why so many people rejected it as Godzilla. However, when the animated series came along that spun off from that movie, they used the exact same design that was unrecognizable, but they gave him a personality that was closer to what we expect from Godzilla. Sort of somewhere between the Showa Godzilla and the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla. But as a result, people accept the animated series as good. People love that series and they accept that as a version of Godzilla. They don't call that version of Godzilla Gino or Zilla or any of the other derogatory nicknames. Meanwhile, Polygoji here looks like a traditional Godzilla, but he had nothing beneath the surface. Every time we saw him, he was just laboriously taking one step forward, or he was asleep. He wasn't really doing anything. He didn't have much in the way of personality. Any personality he might have had, we had to be told about by the human characters and saw no evidence of, or very little evidence of, when he was actually on screen. So he could have technically looked like anything and it wouldn't have mattered. He still would not have been accepted by the fandom at large. So that's what this series really needs to get right. They've drastically redesigned the monsters from a visual standpoint, but are those monsters characters? That's what's going to matter when all is said and done. Even so, this trailer for Singular Point still looks better than the entire Polygon trilogy so far, if only for the fact that there's color. Actual color, like a wide palette of colors. The Polygon trilogy, for the most part, was very drab and dismal and boring to look at. Planet of the Monsters was almost completely gray the whole way through, with very few exceptions. And even when there was color in those movies, it was dismal. It was not interesting. This has a vibrancy to it. This feels alive. And speaking of alive, the animation also looks good, because you've got characters actually moving. The Polygon Godzilla barely moved. And yes, I know, he was the size of a mountain. It takes more effort to move that much weight and mass and whatever. But you know what? It's animation. If you're not gonna actually animate the thing that you're making an animated work about, then what's even the point? Here, everything is moving. This trailer is full of motion. And, thankfully, the 3D models of the monsters blend in well with the 2D of the human characters. Not that we see many shots of them at the same time, but they all look like they're from the same series. They don't look like they're awkwardly meshed together, which is very much what SSSS Gridman did, and I'm very pleased to see that that's the direction they're going in. Even the tone looks different. Like, the Polygon trilogy kept engineering ways to be dark and depressing, even when it felt insincere for it to go in that direction. Because it just could not accept the idea of there possibly being a happy ending. It had to be dark. It had to be depressing. It was the most emo anime I have ever seen, and that's counting Death Note. But here, I mean, look at the tagline. Face down a hopeless future. That's basically saying, even if it looks like you can't win, that's no excuse to give up. Boy, is that a message we could use these days. And the music I also like. This grand operatic score. I was actually kind of hoping for something like that. But then again, this trailer still only tells us so much. There is still a possibility that this has completely missed the mark. Maybe the drastic redesigns are warning. But that's really the only red flag I can see. There were red flags all over the Polygon trilogy. Here, I'm not really sensing too many aside from those drastic redesigns. But like I said, they could work if they actually remember that the monsters are characters and we need to care about them. Just as much as we do about the humans, that is. Well, there you have it. That's my take on this trailer, and man, I'm hoping this turns out well. I don't want this to be another failure. We will see, though. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, then go down to the description to find links to follow us on DeviantArt, Patreon, and Twitter. While you're there, you'll also find the Amazon links for the original novels Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, and The Occult Mafia. 2 books I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.